All right. Welcome everyone to the frequency community call for the month of July 2025. Uh, I'm your host. Will is in Berlin, right? Will? That's uh, so I'm taking over hosting duties today. Will may chime in as necessary. Um, so let's get down to it. Our agenda today, we're gonna talk about the frequency releases, uh, what's in progress, what got deployed to mainnet, and we'll do some community updates on some development activities going on, look at the metrics, discuss any open questions. So with that, let's talk about what we have in progress on frequency. First up, we've got the revision of the permission system. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because we dedicated the bulk of a call to discussing this, I think either last month or the month before. I will just, and I'll put a link in the chat to the PR. Um, that is here. Where's the chat? Can't find the chat. There's the chat. Okay. Sorry. There's a PR with the design doc. This is just basically we're sort of overhauling our schemas and delegation system to be a little more user-friendly and a little more featureful. So I do have one question if we want to take a quick poll. Let me see if I can find that in the design doc. Okay, so real quick poll. Naming. Currently, it's been suggested this. If you look at the design doc, we're going to sort of a three-level entity system on chain where we currently only have one entity, which is a schema. What is currently a schema was proposed to be now called a schema version, and then they would be collected into sort of a meta object called a schema, and they would live underneath the protocol. So if you think about our naming, our nomenclature, for instance, right now we have a dsnp.broadcast name that points to a list of schema versions for that schema. So DSNP would be the protocol, the schema would be broadcast, dsnp.broadcast, and schema version would be all the individual updates to that schema that have been published. In conversation, I've found that having both schema and schema version in the naming system has been a bit confusing. And I just was spitballing some other names we might think of for the different levels. One suggestion I had was that we might want to keep the name of the bottommost level to be schema as it currently is now to avoid confusion, but certainly open to any other suggestions. Anyone can feel free to comment in this PR on the names, or if anybody wants to sort of shout out a name, like I said, I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but if anybody's got some good suggestions beyond what you see on the screen, feel free. Otherwise, I think we can move on to the next topic. And that would be provider and app contexts, which I think is something that Matthew is going to talk about.
Puneet, I believe.
Oh, Paneet. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, okay, I'll drop a link to the design doc. Currently, it's in PR. We are still updating it. But the core idea behind this work around provider context is currently the provider can only register a name, and with this design, we are trying to expand the provider model to include more details around apps. So a single provider can register multiple applications and with their own context, such as brand, name, logo. This would allow for many companies who have single legal entity but provide multiple applications to be able to use the single provider system, but be able to manage multiple applications. In general, we are going to introduce some sort of an application registry that would host each application metadata, and be able to update that registry or modify it using some sort of governance to prevent things like phishing and um, uh, unauthorized modifications. Uh, the downstream updates that would entail with this would be that providers will be able to share capacity among different applications, so that will prevent them from having separate providers for separate applications in use. That will introduce some good app management mechanism through provider dashboard. It would also enable um, sign in with frequency to provide much richer context about different applications to the wallet. So that will streamline a better user experience with multiple applications. And yeah, for now, we are still exploring what will be the different components of this provider context system. But generally, the idea is to move away from one-on-one provider to application to single provider to multiple application kind of ecosystem. That's it to add on it. If there are any questions.
Yeah, Puneet, can you talk about how this might be envisioned to tie into our existing delegation system?
I don't have that context with me. Will you want to add something on it?
Yeah, I can add a little bit in. The thought right now, at least, is that you would still be delegating to the highest level. You wouldn't be delegating to an application. The reason for this is multiple, but the main piece of the puzzle is that uh, the top level represents a company. And if you are sharing your data with one application from a company, then you're effectively sharing that information with all of them. And uh, that may not always be evident, right, from the perspective of the user. You may not necessarily realize that if you're giving information to Facebook, that you're also giving it to Instagram. But from a structure of who has access to that data, it's usually that way. Although, granted, applications can and companies can choose to set up different ways. As someone asks in the chat, capacity is managed at that kind of company level. So it is still the kind of responsibility of the company to, when you're boosting or staking to the chain to give capacity to an application, you're actually giving it effectively to that kind of company level. Many applications, the company and the application are effectively the same, but from the perspective of companies that have multiple applications, that would be shared across them all.
All right. Thank you, Will, for that commentary. Thank you, Puneet. Next up, we have Ethereum RPC support, which is something that we are exploring right now as to how to add that to frequency. And I think talking about that will be Aramik.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Yes.
so in Polkadot ecosystem, basically, it seems like it appears to be three ways to do this. One is just using the Frontier code base, which is an open source project that allows using regular EVM and the Ethereum RPC integration with any substrate node. That's one option. The second option was, I think we talked about Pilot Revive, and that's a newer way of doing it, and it's more efficient in terms of running any EVM contract. It has its own RPC support, which is a bit different. It's standalone. You can run it outside of the node itself as a separate binary. And there is a third option. There are some third-party providers like Epico that they're working on something like this, but that's not open source yet. So we looked into Palette Revive before. Now I think our main focus right now it's more looking at the frontier side. One of the things that Palette Revived seem to be they're kind of like they're winding down the development on it for some other priority. So I don't know at what stage it is right now. But I think we are pursuing all those three tracks that I talked about. But today I can talk about more about the frontier side. So for frontier is used on Moonbeam and other providers, Ethereum compatible chains. And it has its own RPC and EVM support, and everything is integrated through the node. I'm doing some experiment and proof of concept to see if we can integrate with Frontier. So far, it seems like there's no issues, but we're gonna see how it's gonna turn out. The idea is it's hard to know what problems we're gonna see before integration. So I'm doing integration in a kind of like dirty way, basically trying to do it fast and dirty to see what are the issues that might come up and trying to tackle that. At least be cognizant of those issues if they come up. But yeah, that's in the process, and let's see how it's going to progress. Probably a week or so to see how that's going to pan out. If you guys have any questions, if you want me to address anything else. Oops. If not, Joe, come back to you.
So, Aramik, you mentioned that the Frontier sort of has multiple components, one of them being the EVM support and the other being the RPC support. And I think you mentioned in the past that it was necessary to integrate the EVM support, even though that's not an immediate goal of this particular. Like our primary focus is adding RPC support for now, but we needed to integrate the EVM component because it contained a lot of type defs and things that both pieces are dependent on. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, so it's usually when you're doing integration, it's easier to do the runtime first. And if people familiar with the structure of the node, you have your runtime code that is upgradable, which usually palettes are part of it. And then you have the node code, which is a native, and it's usually not upgradable. You can upgrade it by deploying a new binary, but you cannot upgrade it using Wasm. So usually it's easier to first do the runtime because it's isolated itself and then do the node because node is usually dependent on the runtime. And the way I'm doing it, I'm adding all the runtime first and then gonna do the node. And the final state might be at some point, if everything goes well, I can pull out the EVM if we don't need it from the runtime and the node is still gonna work. But we don't know yet. So that's why I was like, okay, let's make sure the runtime is completely there and then we can make the node work and then we can then tweak it to see what we want to do with it.
Okay. Yeah, that was my follow-on question was did you envision sort of disabling the EVM piece? And I guess the answer is potentially, yes. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have ongoing work for the Ethereum bridge, which is the capability to bridge frequency to Ethereum mainly for the purpose of moving tokens. And talking about that will be Andy.
Thanks, Joe. Quick update. We currently have a PR with XCM configurations that allow the transfer frequency token to AsaHub on the West End network. PR reviews are welcome. The next steps after we merge this PR would be to also be able to test this on the Paseo network. with the end goal essentially pushing this up to mainnet at some point and allowing users to participate in the Ethereum ecosystem by bridging the token via Snowbridge. That said, just we have a PR open and are welcoming new reviews.
Thanks, Andy. I know that both Andy and Matthew have done tremendous work on that bridging support. It's quite a lot of moving pieces and parts, quite complex, and they've done a great job, not only on the work on the integration itself, but also in educating the rest of the team. So thank you, Andy and Matthew, for that. All right, mainnet upgrades. Mainnet has now been upgraded to version 1.17.2. Included in that release are these, among probably some other bug fixes. We have the main features that were rolled out were the new account recovery system, the ability for MSAs to hold tokens, and EIP 712 support for SECP 256K1 signatures, which are the Ethereum wallet style signatures. EIP 712 is structured payload signing. So we'll talk briefly about these. Matthew, if you'd like to give us a brief overview of the recovery system.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. There's a link in the chat for the design document if you want to dig into the details. High level overview, if you lose the keys that control your MSA, what happens to all of your online content that is linked to your MSA? Well, we've come up with a system that allows you to recover your MSA. The user originally needs to maintain control over some sort of authentication contact, usually an email system, could also be SMS at this point. And you will receive a secret code, which is just a hex value. It's formatted a little bit nicer so that you can save it. And with those two pieces of information, you can later submit those to a recovery provider, which is sort of a special case of a provider that will be approved by the frequency governance to make sure that recovery providers are somewhat vetted, as this allows people to get control over accounts. We want to make sure that's very secure. But given your secret recovery code and your email or authentication contact, you can install a new key with that recovery provider, which will allow you access to your MSA. There's a bunch of cryptography involved to make sure that it's all secure. And what we've done so far is added the extrinsics to the blockchain that allows this to be installed. And there will be future updates to add recovery providers and other features as we decide we need them. If you have any questions, let me know right now. I'll be happy to answer them, or have a look through the design docs and let us know what you think.
Terrific. Thank you, Matthew. So the next feature that was rolled out to mainnet now is MSAs holding tokens. We went through a design doc for this on a call. I think it was the last frequency call. Just a quick recap on MSAs holding tokens. Here were the goals that we had. We wanted MSAs to hold tokens, so therefore an MSA needed to have a deterministic public account address so that anyone can send tokens to an MSA given only their MSA ID. But those token accounts needed to be keyless because MSAs cannot send tokens on their own. They can only receive tokens. In order to withdraw tokens from an MSA, the action must be initiated by the receiver via a signed payload. And then in that design discussion, we discussed the possibility of that being a free extrinsic versus something where the fee was paid directly out of the proceeds that you were withdrawing. So, sort of free in the sense that it would not have required the receiver to hold tokens prior to withdrawing them, but it would have deducted the fee from the token balance being withdrawn. At the end of the day, the way we implemented this was that the MSA gets an Ethereum style address, and as discussed previously on another call, the Ethereum addresses are easily convertible to Polkadot style addresses by suffixing with a known suffix. So we have a prefix which we've created specifically for MSA Ethereum addresses. We get the MSA ID as a U64 and the hash of this string as sort of a seed. And then we hash the entire thing and take the last 20 bytes of that, and that is our Ethereum style address for the MSA. And in the end, we did decide to implement the token withdrawal as a free extrinsic. We're able to limit abuse cases of that free extrinsic through the transaction extension, which basically validates, performs various validations before the transaction enters the pool, so it doesn't spam the chain. And that seems like it'll be sufficient. Any questions? All right, terrific. Moving on to EIP 712 support. I think Aramik is on deck to talk about that.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, what is EIP 712? EIP 712 is basically, it's like so when you're using MetaMask, if you're using EIP 712, you would see nice what the structure of the data, and you would see a nice representation of what you're signing instead of seeing a hex representation of the binary of what you're signing. So that is the whole definition of EIP 712, trying to display what you're signing in a better user-friendly way. And it's mainly used in Ethereum ecosystem and MetaMask. And we added that part for payload signing on frequency. The difference is, so in frequency, if you take a look, we have two kinds of things that we are signing. Either we are signing an extrinsic or we are signing an independent payload. This EIP 712 is for signing an independent payload because that's majority of the things that we are signing using, I would say, user wallets. The other thing that is extrinsic signing, that is, we support the EIP 191, which is the basically simpler version of it. But we don't have EIP 712 for extrinsic because that's a whole separate, like the effort is too much for us, and I don't see right now we have the use case for it. So using this, what you can do, you can basically, if you have a payload that we have multiple payloads for adding delegations, like adding graph data or graph keys or stuff like that. You can sign it using EIP 712, and then it gets submitted to the chain, and chain can verify those signatures. But to summarize what we have right now on chain, we can support all like this signature 191 SCCP 256K1 signatures for everything that is payload and extrinsic. But for payloads alone, we additionally support the EIP 712, which is like the seeing the whatever you're signing in a nice way. Yeah, I know this might be a little confusing, so I'm open if you guys have any questions for clarification and where we are right now. No question. We
Good.
can move.
Don't see any questions. Terrific. All right. Thank you, Aramik. Moving on to community updates. We are happy to announce that we now have a new team member who is in charge of developer relations. Diego, if you'd like to care to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah, this is kind of like a really quick intro. Diego Lizarazo. Right now, I'm in I'm in Florida, but usually I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. And I kind of like joined as a senior developer relations engineer. So that means that I'm going to kind of like connecting a little bit in these community calls, also in Discord and other community channels, to talk a little bit about like changes in documentation, upcoming events, new releases, and pretty much anything that kind of like affects developers. So I just can encourage everyone to kind of like hit me up on Discord whenever you see me there, and quite likely you are going to start seeing more from me in terms of new content and anything that has to do with developers, especially getting your feedback and helping anyone onboard it, you know? So I'm really glad to be here, and I sincerely appreciate your time. That's it.
Wonderful. Welcome aboard, Diego. We're happy to have you and looking forward to getting some, much better communications out there for our developer community. Next up, we have Gateway and Sign In with Frequency supporting Ethereum keys, and talking about that will be Shannon.
Thanks. So let me share. Oh, how do I share? Should I put the link up? I'll do that.
Yeah, you can put the link up, or I think you can just share and it'll replace mine
Okay.
if you want.
Maybe I'll just do that. Okay. Share that. How's that coming up? Okay. All right. I'm doing something weird with my hang on a second. Not sure what's going on. Let me just turn this down so that you don't hear an echo. Is that better?
You're
Okay.
good.
Okie doke. So the first thing I want to start out with is the 1.5.5 release of Gateway. So to support the new features in frequency, the Gateway devs have been doing their own work. And for those who are new to this call, Gateway is a suite of microservices intended to help Web 2 applications integrate with frequency through REST APIs. So starting with the release v1.5.5, as you can see here, we have the following important changes. You'll note a lot of Ethereum keys support, and what that does is it supports the providers that have Ethereum wallets who want to integrate with Gateway and Frequency, so they'll be able to operate Gateway, create and manage their provider account, sort of, and post messages on their own and on behalf of users using an Ethereum wallet, such as MetaMask. Secondly, Gateway now supports a similar ability for end users to use Ethereum wallets with the Frequency app. So that's what we mean when we talk about signing payloads. So I can, as an end user, I can delegate to you a provider. Both of us can use MetaMask or some other Ethereum compatible wallet to do all of this, and we don't have to worry about trying to install and use a Polkadot compatible wallet. We can use Ethereum ones. So in order to do that, we have to also support sign up with frequency version 2.2. Next, there were significant improvements to logging and monitoring, and there are more coming up. Gateway microservices now, their logging output can be JSON, or it can be colorized for more human-friendly output that is easier to read and debug, and a wider choice of, well, actually the full choice of log levels. It also delivers Prometheus metrics with an /metrics endpoint for better health monitoring of the different microservices. So next, 1.5.6 supports adding recovery commitment on account creation, and that's outlined in the secure account recovery design system that was talked about earlier in this meeting. So that, you add a recovery, you optionally add a recovery secret when an end user creates an MSA. Next, we had a little update to document images to fix a recommended change by one of our partners, and that was very much appreciated, that suggestion. And finally, there is some more Docker image tweaks, but essentially, this is the 1.5.5 and 1.5.6 are the big feature releases. We have more exciting stuff coming up, including support for actually performing that recovery, and as well as improvements to the health monitoring and the readiness monitoring and whatnot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, let's see, where are we? Next up, we have Will to talk about what's going on at the Web3 Summit in Berlin.
Yeah, so there's several of us from the frequency ecosystem that have been talking at the Web3 Summit here in Berlin. I gave a talk earlier today. I hope these talks should be published later, probably in about a month or so. Harry Evans, who is also here, gave a great talk yesterday, and we actually have a workshop that we're running tomorrow. So if anybody is listening to this and it's before noon Berlin time on the 18th of July, feel free to drop by that workshop. Be excited to have you there. But it's really exciting. Lots of people talking about frequency here, and excited to see where things go. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Will. All right, it's metrics time. Let's take a look at the metrics on mainnet. We passed 2 million new user activations this week. And look at that count going up still. Great work to everybody on the team for achieving this milestone. We've got almost, we continue to nudge that million mark for graph activations. And we've got, this is showing testnet, but this is I don't know if it's rolling or rolled out to mainnet, the AT protocol content feed, but we're ingesting a lot of content from the AT protocol. So that's pretty cool as well. We also got added to a new dashboard token terminal. We were recently added to that. So you can now go to token terminal and take a look at frequency metrics showing our monthly active users and some various other metrics, daily, weekly, core developer contributions to our Git repos. Somewhere on here, there is a way to show where we fall in terms of active chains. And Will, what place were we in when you looked at it? It was.
I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's changing all the time. So you'll have to go take it for yourself.
We were definitely, near the top of the list as far as activity there. So, great work, everyone, for achieving all these metrics. And speaking of AT protocol, we have Wes to talk about that.
Yeah, I can say a few words. So as you saw on that metrics screen, there's been some ongoing work that is really about using frequency as the underlying infrastructure for an AT protocol relay. AT protocol, as used in the Blue Sky application and others, is a separate protocol from DSMP, which a lot of the frequency schemes have been based on. So this has introduced some additional schemas on frequency, specifically for the fields that represent AT protocol commits, identity, changes and account status changes. And what you see on the metric screen is really the number of individual DIDs coming through from Blue Sky that we have seen really, as in about two plus months that this has been running against testnet, and the metadata for those accounts transfers over. So these are not on-chain users. I think that's important to say, but they are being used by the application in this case that is powering the relay in order to keep those DIDs synced with the data that is put into off-chain batches for this. So the end user utility or the developer utility from this system is really about having an alternative to the Blue Sky Firehose in order to see the activity that is coming through on the AT protocol and build applications off of that. You can now do that directly against frequency. And also, because of the qualities and properties of the blockchain and how frequency works with batches, you also have this historical kind of replay aspect of being able to go back in time and see from a time sequencing perspective what was going on in the Blue Sky network at a certain point in time. So there's been a lot of work gone into creating that system so it can be very stable and high performance. Uh, Frequency is certainly not having to break a sweat to handle this, so that's a great validation of the architecture that it supports for these off-chain batches to be linked. There's more work to come there, and some of the things we're exploring are how do you link AT protocol DIDs potentially to MSAs on frequency, and how to better capture some of the provenance information that comes from the AT protocol itself. But that is the current status. As we speak, looking at making sure we have all our ducks in a row to turn this on mainnet. So I expect it to be live imminently. Those 9 million user metadata accounts will transfer over to the mainnet activity as well. So the main thing on mainnet is we'll start producing these batches to build apps against. Any questions?
Great. Thank you, Wes, for that overview. And just another highlight of ways that we can leverage frequency to integrate with all kinds of other projects. That's all I have for today. Do we have any open questions or items anyone wants to bring up? We've got a little less than 10 minutes remaining if anybody has anything to bring up.
I think Scott had a question in the chat. Will capacity be managed at the provider level across all the apps? This is regarding the context, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I can answer that. The answer is that yes. The capacity will remain at the provider level, not at the app level, so that it's easier for kind of companies that produce multiple apps and maybe brand the app slightly differently or have slightly different features in their apps. They can share that capacity amongst their applications.
Thank you. Wes?
Yeah, and this relates a little bit to that AT protocol work. I missed the first couple of minutes of this meeting, so apologies if this has been answered. But in terms of the permission system, the schema format currently in terms of describing Parquet files is somewhat limited. And one of the things that the team ran into in producing this is that we wanted fields in Parquet that are optional, for example, and there's not currently a way to represent that on chain, so that you can't entirely recreate the Parquet schema without some outside information. What are we thinking about how schema actual data evolves with this system?
Well, I guess I'll speak to that a little bit. Schemas are sort of an abstract concept in terms of on-chain. I mean, currently, I believe we have an enum that the schema has to either be Avro binary or Parquet. But the chain doesn't do anything more than just look at the enum. It doesn't parse the content of the schema or anything like that. So any limitations in the format are limitations of the format itself and not necessarily anything inherent to the chain. That said, if we feel that there are other formats that the chain should allow, we can easily add to that enum, I think. Um, any limitations in expressing different data layouts in Parquet would be something that we would have to address in the Parquet project itself, or adopt another file format if we wanted to. Will?
Yeah, I'll say I think what Wes is saying is there's effectively, and in the documentation we have this, the way that you structure a Parquet file is not Parquet specific. Parquet doesn't have a specific schema structure per se. It's complicated. And so the structure that is put on chain is one that is a little bit more limited and doesn't have things like required fields. So I think there is some space to make some changes there and do some updates to that. In addition to potentially adding some additional data types, I think one that we've talked about doing before and that I saw a little bit more need to do it in something I was testing out is like a raw format that the data itself doesn't have an explicit schema outside of the structure of the protocol that it's trying to reference. But I think that is separate from kind of the rework of the permission system. So I would say, Wes, go ahead and like yourself or one of your team, go ahead and put in an issue. And we also probably need to get better about kind of structuring the documentation around that and other schemas as well, because some of them are a little bit more advanced. The Avro schemas are adopting the Avro format for describing those schemas. JSON schemas is another one I think we've talked about doing. But the Parquet format schema that Frequency uses is exclusive to Frequency in that no one has yet needed a way to do that as of yet in the Parquet system. Again, we looked at various ways, including like uploading a fake Parquet file to kind of produce that, but it definitely, Parquet doesn't lend itself to schemification in the same way that Avro or JSON or even raw does.
Yeah, I think what happens is it looks like you are submitting JSON to the chain, but internally that gets turned into some data structures that have some limitations. So yeah, I like the idea of potentially just allowing pure JSON as long as it's kind of well formatted syntax wise. But thank you for the answers.
Great. Any other issues to discuss or questions, concerns anyone want to raise? All right. Well, then I think we can give everybody 3 minutes back. We have the next frequency call is scheduled for Thursday, 21 August 2025 at 10 a.m. LA time, 1 p.m. New York time. Looking forward to seeing everyone then. Bye-bye.
Thanks.